Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So the fourth part of the Jedi Fallen Order story takes us to Kashyyyk, and our heroes are greeted by an Imperial blockade of the planet. The Empire, as we know, is very interested in stripping all the resources off of Kashyyyk and of turning the Wookiees into slave labor. This is one of those interesting things about Star Wars, the fact that when the Mantis arrives, according to Sir Junda, she's using their transponder to broadcast Imperial signals, so that way the Empire thinks that they are an Imperial ship. And so Grease is supposed to just basically fly casual, look like they belong there, but it goes to that whole thing about like how a ship can just, fly by and nobody pays attention to it. It's basically because nobody has a window, right? Nobody's looking out the window at some ship passing by to go, hey, that doesn't actually look like an Imperial ship, right? It's all sensors and whatnot. So if you get a transponder, I guess everything works out fine. But as they fly down to the planet, there's some stormtroopers who actually see them fly by, and it looks like they're in one of those situations where in Revenge of the Sith, you remember where Yoda had his command center and where when Order 66 came down, the clones tried to assassinate him there, right? It's in one of those little, canopy, cupola type situations. But anyway, the Mantis is able to find a place to set down, but there is an active engagement going on. Cal ends up hijacking an Imperial walker, and apparently they have like a little turret sitting on the back of the Imperial walker, which is something I never knew about Imperial walkers unless these are just customized ones. But anyway, so in the midst of trying to help whatever's going on, he hijacks a walker and ends up destroying another Imperial walker and blowing up a bunch of troop transports and whatnot. And who should suddenly, like Spider-Man, swing on a grappling line and land on the windshield of the AT-AT but Saw Gerrera. Saw Gerrera is here with the partisans trying to free a bunch of Wookiees. Now, Seer is not necessarily suspicious of Saw. She's not necessarily fully trusting of what he's up to. She thinks that what's happening on Kashyyyk is a losing cause and that Saw has more on his mind than just freeing Wookiees, but we don't necessarily know anything about that yet. We get to a situation where, in order to find Tarfful, Saw says, yeah, he is the freedom fighter and nobody knows where he is. He's striking from the heart of the Shadowlands on Kashyyyk. And basically we get into a sort of quid-pro-quo situation, which is, hey, you help me free these Wookiees and then you'll be able to, talk to some Wookiees and maybe get a line on where Tarfful is. Saw also asks Cal, as you would expect him to, what he wants with Tarfful, and Cal's answer is Jedi business, which is always a funny thing to me. I really like hearing that phrase when it comes up. Anyway, so as Saw and Cal talk about what the plan is to assault this particular Imperial refinery, we find out that they are taking tree sap and trying to make it into a quote-unquote powerful compound. What that compound is, we don't know yet, or what its purpose is, what it's used for, but that they have been accelerating production. And so not only does Saw want to free the Wookiees, but he also wants to destroy this refinery and whatever it is they're doing with the sap. He asks Cal for his part in this plan to be the one to free the Wookiees, and he kind of gives him a pat on the chest, and Cal demonstrates himself to be kind of impressionable in this moment where, after Saw shoots a grapple hook up and swings away, Cal looks at Beatty and says, you hear that? He needs me, So that was kind of an interesting little character point, I guess, to keep in mind about Cal as we move on through the story. However, once everything is said and done and Saw gives a big victory speech to the assembled Wookiees and partisans and whatnot, along with Cal too, he then tries to recruit Cal into the partisans, and Cal says, yeah, I'm, kind of into that idea, but I'm in the middle of something right now and I can't step away from it. And so Saw leaves it as an open-ended invitation. In terms of that mission that Cal's on, it's a success in the sense that one of the Wookiees says that he knows Tarfful and he'll put in a good word for Cal the next time he sees Tarfful. So hopefully that will enable that conversation to happen. In the meantime, Ser Junda has been monitoring Imperial comms channels and hears that distress calls are going out, so of course they got to beat feet as soon as possible. But one of the other things that she finds out is that Project Augur has been reactivated. So the activities of the Mantis crew on Zepho have apparently gotten out and got the attention of the Empire. So they are back on Zepho, and they may have found yet another of the tombs of the sages. And so it's going to be time for our heroes to go back to Zepho and see what's up. And that's pretty much everything you need to know about the story that takes place on Kashyyyk, at least with this particular visit to Kashyyyk in Jedi Fallen Order. And that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. I hope you will also consider, if you don't do it already, supporting this podcast in my efforts to put out a daily dose of Star Wars joy for you. I've been doing it since July of 2014. We're coming up on our 10th anniversary next year, which is absolutely crazy to think about. And if you want to support this daily effort, I hope you'll consider going to patreon.com/SW7x7. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the podcast, as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
Star Wars 7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyrighted by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.